Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor on behalf of Workplace Wellness Association of Southern Africa um, to have you with us today, and my privilege. Today we will explore how wellness and innovation unite to build stronger, more resilient workplaces. You're not just attendees; you are part of a national movement that is redefining how South Africans work, live, and thrive. Remember our guiding truth. Wellness is not an event, it's a way of doing business. Before we begin, just a few quick reminders. Please keep your microphones muted. We will ask you to use the chat functionality to raise questions and make comments, and we'll respond to all your questions at the end. It's now my pleasure to introduce George Marx, our chairperson. George, over to you.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. Why are we here? Because there's a clear and urgent need to bridge the gap between financial soundness and workplace well-being. Our goal is to empower ambassadors, brokers, and partners to prosper while helping employees live better lives. This is about shifting the conversation from viewing wellness as a cost, understanding it as an investment in people and performance. The Wasaa Wellness Wheel is expanding into our four-wheel model. Just there we go. There's the slide. Being the employee, the company, customer, and community wellness, all interconnected, all vital to sustainable growth of the organization as the company as part of the country's growing economy. Today starts off with the CPD section. It brings together some incredible voices driving the wellness revolution. Firstly, Andre Jacobs, who is CEO of the Knowledge Hub, who translates wellness into measurable business value. Then we have Dr. Reinder Nota, CEO of National Healthcare Group, demonstrating the life-changing power of preventative care. Then we will have Gus Liebenberg, founder of Paycheck, explaining how earned wage access is changing financial wellness. Steven van Basten, CEO of LifeQuest Coaching, using AI and digital tools to serve clients more intelligently. Each of them represents a pillar of the ecosystem that we are building together. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this very valuable and insightful webinar, we believe, and we are looking forward to improve workplace wellness in South Africa with your assistance. Chris, back to you.
Thank you, George. In my over-eagerness, I forgot to mention your bio. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's anybody that do not know of George Marx, one of our country's leading healthcare actuaries, that has decades of leadership in occupational health, employee well-being, and strategic workforce development. George has played a pivotal role in reshaping South Africa's wellness landscape, and he's known for connecting data, policy, and human impact, turning wellness from a cost center into a driver of performance. It is, however, now my privilege to introduce Dr. Reinder Nota to you. Reiner is one of the pioneering healthcare entrepreneurs behind South Africa's low-income capitation models. He founded CareCross Health, chaired key industry bodies, and helped scale managed healthcare nationally. Reiner, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for the introduction. And yeah, it's a privilege to be able to discuss the advantages and essentially the need for primary healthcare in companies and their employees. So if we can go. This one is. So what is primary health? There are a few academic definitions, and one of them would be the broad, accessible, community-based care, addressing basically preventative, curative, and rehabilitative needs. In maybe normal language, it means access to a nurse, a pharmacist, or a doctor who can pick up the very early signs of pathology or disease and ideally prevent it from spreading to what we can call secondary care and tertiary care. Primary care effectively is the gatekeeper and ensuring that highly costly secondary and tertiary care could be prevented. So if we look at the core functions of primary care, the very first one is the first contact access. Clearly, access itself is not a care, but to have an ability to provide care, for example, someone lives opposite a hospital, but can simply not get into the hospital because of either financial reasons or otherwise, then that care is not yet primary care or accessible care. So the access is absolutely critical. Following out that is comprehensive care. Comprehensive care means you have now been diagnosed and now there is a range of special investigations and pharmaceuticals, tablets that are needed. Without that, clearly also primary care would not be able to do its function. A third point is care coordination, and that often had to do with chronic medication, chronic diseases, and a very clear prevention of moving on to a secondary or tertiary care situation. And then ideally, but often not that easy, are the long-term relationships within the care system with the patient. Let's go. So primary care, critically important. It improves lives through proactive care. Proactive care means a couple of things. Early detection. Without that, we, without a shadow of a doubt, move over to a costly secondary and tertiary care situation. Care continuity also. It improves safety and adherence, meaning that there is sustainability in the care that is given. Very important, chronic disease management. About 10% of the population have a chronic illness, not often their own fault. Some are linked clearly to lifestyles, but these diseases need to be managed in order to prevent a higher cost situation upstream. And then lastly, addressing social determinants, nutrition, things like stress, poor hygiene, are all aspects that have a massive influence in the pathology. So very important when one discusses this with potential employers, what does it really do to reduce absenteeism? And these are one of the big aspects that all companies have an issue with. Absenteeism management and often also sick note fraud. So the first thing is early detection. Early detection obviously prevents serious illness. Ongoing management of chronic conditions. Any neglect here, a very easy one to explain, a diabetic foot can either end up in gangrene and an amputation, or it could be completely prevented by a controlled diabetic. And South Africa has many of these burdens of disease. Very important, easier access to care. Access is virtually non-negotiable in primary care. And it makes sense and it sounds very obvious, but we have many patients that simply don't have access, where doctors are often able to still treat, but there is no system that allows these patients to those doctors. And here, telehealth and digital care will play a major role in the future. Then the focus on the prevention of care. Here, primary care also promotes wellness, regular health education, vaccines, etc. And then lastly, something that we see more and more in South Africa is the reduction of stress and mental health. There we find that primary care can play a vital role. What is the financial benefits for employers? And I mean, there's a whole raft, but the three big ones that we think are worth mentioning today. First of all, simply cost reduction, shorter times off work, lesser costly interventions, less x-rays or special investigations because we picked up something early. On all fronts, both on the front of the employer, the employee, as well as the system in general, cost reduction. Improved productivity, it's quite an obvious one because you have lower healing times, quicker back at work, often higher morale, and those help with that. And the long-term value cannot be overemphasized. Your part of the population, your low-income workforce with burdens of chronic illnesses through suitable primary care interventions will have a massive long-term value, where a stroke can be prevented by picking up blood pressure when the chap has just started working for you. 5, 6, or 10 years later, serious cardiac or cerebral vascular incidences are prevented. And then lastly, some practical strategies for brokers and HR managers. Clearly, the revolution that we want to achieve here, where not a single employed person should be without primary care, needs a very specific strategy. I have listed 5 here. Assessment. When you see a company, you will typically pick up that up to 80% of their staff have no cover and 20% are on the well-known medical aids. That is an inequitable and unsustainable situation. Once you have picked up what is missing, there is a design in what we can offer. Now, these designs are relatively successfully done by existing medical aids and programs. And one of those will be chosen within the budgetary constraints. Then you have deployment, both communication to staff as well as management. We know, and I think most of you will know, that there is a huge acute need on solving this final problem where low-cost employees simply have no access. The state, as we all know, is seldom satisfactory, and the private sector must be ready for the challenge. Optimization. This again is specifically important for people that are unfortunately enough to have a chronic illness and need to be carefully managed. And this is completely impossible without access to primary care. And then lastly, measurements and scaling. It is important to know that companies must know that to be taking care of their staff will ultimately have for their own company and the staff itself a financial and moral benefit. A last statement. What does understanding the value of primary care mean for a world with rising medical costs? So what wasn't really true up till now is that affordability is now a reality. You cannot claim that I can't afford it. You can only say that I don't really at this stage care yet, or that it's not a priority. But the prices with digital health and telephony have come down, and it is today affordable. And on that note, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Reinder, for that very insightful information and the rise of the wave in terms of affordable healthcare. We're looking forward to supporting you in it. Next is Stephen van Bassen. And Stephen brings decades of experience in human behavior, leadership, and communication. He's a respected philosopher, life coach, and speaker, blending deep insight with practical relevance. And today we're going to learn more about artificial intelligence. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. I have a short 8 minutes with you. So I'm going to make this short and sweet and to the point. If you have any questions, there will be options for that after. So I'm really here today just to focus very specifically on AI. And, really AI is the equivalent of Google on steroids. It's a massive database with beautiful lightning speed processors that you're able to interact with in a human fashion. It mimics human behavior. And, the beautiful thing is that when you ask it something, it just does it. Okay. And there are no questions. There's no double guessing or second guessing. Never on holiday. Geen welsynsprobleme nie. And it really just gives you answers as opposed to Google, where you first get adverts and then you've got to sift through a million options that it's brought back to you. So let's work through this. Some of the common myths. AI will replace brokers. Not really. AI can and will assist humans and human advice, and will actually make us more efficient and effective. AI is always accurate is the myth. Well, reality, AI can and does make mistakes. I asked at the time in South Africa the other day, was about 6 hours wrong. So you need to keep the human in the loop. Whatever you do with AI, you've always got to be interacting with your own brain and your own common sense, and also researching to make sure that the info is accurate. AI, and next myth, AI understands clients like people do. No, AI has no empathy, no personality, and no context. It's just data. All right, and AI knows everything. Now, it knows a lot, and it knows a lot more than I do or anyone in this room or on this webinar, but it does not know everything, and some of the stuff may be outdated. And I like this one. AI is only for tech experts. Actually, it's like riding a bicycle. When you look at it the first time, you go, yeah, it looks difficult. Then you try it out, you fall off a couple of times, but once you get it, it's got forever. And you learn and you know how to use it in future. So why AI matters? Oh, there's so many things. Better client advice, time savings, you can stay competitive. 5 minutes ago, I asked the question to AI, why AI for financial advisors and specifically in the medical arena? And I'll give it to you very quickly. Plan comparison at scale, intelligent client fact finding, claims and usage analysis, PMB and compliance support, client education and explanations, automated annual reviews, although with a human in the loop, and then advisor differentiation. And this is the big one for each one of you. And I'd like to suggest that if you're not using AI yet, please get onto it. It is massively important. It's here to stay, whether we like it or not, and it will and does make a massive difference. So AI in daily life, already we're using it. It's part of our life. Netflix, WhatsApp suggestions, Google Map routes, etc., etc. It's been around for 10, 15 years already. It's just become commercialized now. So what can AI do? Summarize complex information, compare options, draft client communications, generate insights, assist with training. There are a million things that you can do with AI. And the biggest advice, or the best advice I can give you today, is get started, find somebody good to teach you and help you. And you will be very, very pleased that you did. So what AI cannot do? Can't feel empathy. It can pretend to be empathetic, but it doesn't feel it. It can't replace trust. It can't build relationships. Although it's programmed to get in rapport with you, you'll feel like you're in a relationship, but you're not. It's a piece of software. It can't replace human judgment. I was saying to some people yesterday that were anti-AI. They said, it gives bad advice. I said, yeah, if I was to say to all of you today, sell your home and buy Bitcoin, I sincerely hope you wouldn't. And if AI told you to sell your home and buy Bitcoin, I sincerely hope you wouldn't. You would use common sense before doing anything dastardly and stupid like that. So let's have a look. So we get personalized product recommendations, AI helps in so many ways, matching client needs, highlighting potential gaps, suggested add-ons. And I know that there are lots and lots of different ways that AI could be incorporated into your daily life. So just a quick idea that you get AI, and then you also get automation. So this is an automation for those of you who know what they look like, but more importantly, this is how it works. I asked my virtual PA to send me an email. This is her. I'm looking forward to our meeting on Thursday about the coaching. Can you give us the website address and a little bit of info? And then I created this answer for me and put it into drafts. Okay, nice to hear from you. Here's the website. This is the process. Looking forward to seeing you. And this is 90% correct. I just needed to tweak this a little bit and then forward it or send it. So AI just in this way saves me hours and hours daily, weekly, monthly, and annually. Right. Thank you. So back to you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. And indeed, we are living in an interesting new world. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Gus Liebenberg. Gus is a seasoned fintech entrepreneur and executive with over 20 years experience. He co-founded Paycheck and helped shape national distribution strategies at both BrightRock and Discovery Invest. Gus is going to explain to us more about the new rise that we're seeing in earned wage access solutions. Over to you, Gus.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Earned Wage Access, or EWA, is an initiative designed to strengthen financial well-being across South Africa's workforce. Today's session will help you to understand the role of EWA and how it can improve employee financial resilience. We will look at realistic South African people, traditional wellness programs, and evaluate those which have been implemented over the last 30 years and where they've fallen short. Our EWA offers practical solutions for both employers and employees, and we go through this. You must consider how EWA could integrate into your client's benefit structure and support productivity and stability in the workforce. Chris, you need to help me here. Okay, so for decades, South Africa has invested heavily in financial literacy programs, budgeting, debt management training, savings and investments training, retirement planning, and understanding employee benefits. These programs are important, but we're adapted mostly from first world models that assume a stable income, a predictable expense pattern, and easy and affordable access to credit. That is not the lives lived or the reality for most South Africans. Now, an easy way to measure this is if we look at these programs and we take a dipstick test today, what would a report card look like if it worked? And then I would fully agree. Your budgeting skills would be perfect if these programs work. Debt management would be under control. Your people will know how to save, what types of investment products, all those things will be stable. And if you go into a company, you'll easily get A and Bs for your report card. Now, the reality of this is slightly different. If you currently go into a company, I would say the report card looks much different. I would say most companies get an F on that. So it's not that people I don't want to be disciplined and save money or have an emergency fund or things like that. Most employees, if you look at all the articles, Old Mutual, Alexander Forbes, NMG, PwC, recent reports has been published. People spend their money on food, transport, and essentials. There is very little left to save for an emergency fund, never mind for long-term planning. It's literally day by day. Now, this all rolls over into the workplace and the business if people are in financial distress. So if we take that into account, the report card doesn't look well. We need to focus on one specific thing. And I'm not saying education is bad. Education must continue, and it's a critical part of long-term. But we need to find a solution to a structural problem. And the structural problem that we've identified is that telling people to build an emergency fund and they never have surplus on their budget is unrealistic. It's not attainable, and the people become despondent in that space. Reaching that gap between advice and actual reality of products is quite important. Which brings us to emergency funding. Now, emergency funding is one of the biggest things and actually quite a simple thing to solve. It brings sustainability. So what is access to emergency funding? It's something that's stable. It doesn't affect your long-term planning. It's money that's readily available. It's easily accessible. And it's something that we need to focus on. Now, what I want to do is I want you to focus for a second. Imagine it's 5 days before payday and you urgently need 500 Rand or 1,000 Rand. Now, luckily we're in January, that's 10 weeks long. So most people will understand this. You need a couple of Rand for food or a medical emergency or something like that, or transport. What is your current options to get that? And what do we tell people from advice? Use your savings. The answer most people give me is, I don't have savings available. No, or there is nothing. That's just life. Use your credit cards. Answer. My credit cards are maxed out. I don't have a credit card. Okay, go to your employer for advance. My employer do not give advances. It's an administrative burden for them. It's a cash flow issue for employers at the end of the day. And the other thing is, people just don't want to ask. They want to expose themselves to that question. Family and friends, it's also the 17th of the month for them. Payday loans, it's expensive. It's a long process. And I'm talking regulated payday loans. So the go-to option a lot of times is these unregulated loans. It's very predatory, high interest rates, and bad for the community at the end of the day. So this is the gap that EWA fills. And this is specifically, EWA is designed to fill this gap. So what is EWA? Earned wage access, in the simplest definition, gives employees access to a portion of the wages that they've already earned between their normal paydays. It's a rule-based environment. So effectively, it simply shifts a portion of their pay at the end of the month to an earlier date in the month when they need it, giving them an alternative to traditional lending. A simple example, let's say an employee earns 10,000 Rand per month. There's 22 workdays in a month. That person effectively earns 455 Rand odd per day. So to test it, if that person works for you for a day, in the first day of the work cycle, and that person's employment is terminated at that point in time, what do you have to pay that employee at the end of the month? That day's work. He's already exchanged his labor. You still need to pay him at that point at the end of the month. That's the law. EWA just uses that principle, but it's a rule-based private system at the end of the day, giving employees access to a portion of the money that they've already earned based on a set of rules that the employer has approved, like 25% of what you've earned up to a maximum of a fixed amount, all depends on the different employers. So why does it matter for employees? It takes people away from that high stress, uncertainty, and results in a more productive workforce at the end of the day. How to choose your EWA provider? I'm going to highlight just a couple of things. In a South African context, you have to be 100% sure that the EWA provider can service everybody equitably. That take things like financial literacy into account, functional literacy. Can people read and do they understand what they read? Complicated applications and things do not work. Next thing that you have to take into account, make sure that your access points are accessible. This is your technology barriers. Not everybody's got Apple iPhones and the best Samsung smartphones on the market. Function phones are very, very dominant in this market. Next part to this, I'm going to play a short video and then I'm going to close off on To close off, from my side, there's still a lot of sort of legacy in the market where people still have an outdated view on earned wage access, and they try to sort of put it under loan products. It's not just another loan product. And as ambassadors, I think to get the message out that earned wage access is a real practical solution to solve a real practical problem, which is emergency funding. And that's basically where I'm going to end this. And back to you, Chris.
Sorry. Thank you, Gus. That's terrific. And personally, for me, the penny really dropped when I realized that people using earned wage access, it's their money. It's not the bank's money. It's your own money, and you use it as responsibly as you possibly can. Next is Andre Jacobs. Andre is a leading voice in healthcare reform, broker education, and ethical healthcare systems. He is a board member of WASA and continues to drive trust, transparency, and measurable value in healthcare. Over to you, Andre.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome, everybody. I'm not sure. We're 244 people online. I think it's wonderful. So I'm just looking for something. Sorry, I apologize. I made some notes. So, yeah, we had so much value up to now, but I just want to try and summarize and just get your mind back to what the people have said. And the nuggets that I took from the discussion, George spoke about wellness, and instead of wellness being an action or a product itself or an expense, he speaks, and I think when we look at it as independent financial advisors, when we look at it as an economic imperative, if you want your clients to prosper, wellness is the only way that they're going to do it. When you are ill, you can't work, you can't earn income. So for the country to actually succeed, we need healthy employees and well employees. The second one was Reinder that speak about primary care. Now in South Africa, we have a debate. We talk about it as national health insurance, and people use the term they want to achieve universal healthcare. Now, South Africa have got a very good level of universal healthcare already. If we want to improve universal healthcare, the best way to do that is looking, and that's a low-hanging fruit for government, is the primary care solutions that the market offers. So that's one of the contributions that you can make to the country. The second one was Stephen that speaks about AI, and that's not Andre's intelligence. It is artificial intelligence. That he spoke about that, and he said something very quickly. AI can make mistakes, and he said something else. And I want to remind the IFAs about this, and that is about the ethics of AI. Check the facts. AI is not for lazy people. AI is for people that want to work more efficient, that want to produce better results. That is what AI is for. It is not a lazy thing to write a document on your behalf. You have to check AI. So I think from that point, Stephen, that was a good ethical test or ethical point for me that I took from that. And Gus spoke about the scorecard thing, what it should be and what it is. And I agree that we are at the second scorecard. Although, and I know that some of us are involved in financial literacy programs, and please remember, Gus said, keep on with that. That is not wrong. But there's a systemic problem, and look at a solution in terms of that. Now, I personally initially thought but now you will put the people in bigger debt if you actually do that. When we look at the case studies, we actually see that less people make use of the system because they start managing their money. And the other thing is they use lesser amounts. Why? Because they start managing the money. And the answer is what Chris said to us. The answer is it is now your money, it's their money that they use instead of somebody else's money. And that is where the penny should drop in terms of earned wage access. Okay, so I have to speak about something else, the landscape for the independent financial advisor. And it is important to recognize that the environment in which independent financial advisor and medical scheme brokers operate has changed dramatically. I don't need to tell you that. We are dealing with year-end increases in medical schemes. We just finished it. And it far outpaces our salary growth. And it places a huge amount of pressure on households and consumers. And they are very price sensitive. And they start comparing and they're asking questions. And that places a huge strain on us and our practice. At the same time, benefit options are immensely complex. We use terminology. You haven't seen IT terminology. I won't go into it with Stephen about that and Gus, but things like protocols and formularies and DSP structures are not intuitive for the average member to actually understand. And because of this complexity and the demand for high quality advice has never ever been higher. People want somebody that can interpret it, that can simplify it, and that can guide him through this process. And therefore, we need to act as solution architects. Traditional growth models doing more of the same are no longer sufficient. The way forward is efficiency, scale, and smarter systems. That's what we need to do. And a broker who thrives works intelligently with structure, clarity, and a well-built practice. Now, this approach defines a modern, future-fit advisory practice built for growth today and tomorrow. What's the missing link? Now, primary care solutions are critical because they address access. Earned wage access plays another role for affordability. It gives employees that breathing space that they may actually need in that month. And AI enters the picture by solving efficiency. It allows the independent financial advisor, the solution architect, to handle more work with fewer errors and faster turnaround time, freeing time and reducing administrative strain. When you attend my AI course that I actually developed, in that specific course, I teach you how to actually, just in year-end revision, save an enormous amount of work and actually be able to do more and deliver more to the clients. But none of these on their own solve the broker's biggest challenge, sustainable growth. That is where practice building becomes a missing link. It is not a product or a tool. It is the foundation that allows access, affordability, and efficiency to translate into a real measurable growth. Without a strong practice structure, benefits of the other solutions cannot be fully realized. Practice builds brings everything together. So, as we look towards 2026 and beyond, it is clear that the role of the independent financial advisor is shifting fundamentally. We are becoming solution architects. You must have a problem and you must solve that problem. That's what we do. PMB expertise is a clear example The average consumer cannot navigate Regulation 8, treatment algorithms, protocols, or exclusions. It is a language that I basically just don't understand. When an advisor understands PMB properly, they become more valuable than the product itself, the medical scheme, the option itself. And the same applies to benefit optimization. How do you use your benefit efficiently? Last night, I had a lady with me in the room where we are all sitting. And she wanted to move from a medical scheme because she just can't afford it. And I first went through what she is on, and I compared it, and she can't do better. But then I said to her, it is how you use your medical scheme that makes the difference. And when she started understanding that, you could see the lights coming on. Now, gap cover, as an example, is a strategy that becomes an extension of responsible advice. The FACE Ombudsman told us that. It's not a mere add-on. Today, wellness prevention must also form part of the advisory ecosystem because they influence long-term claims and behavior. Prevention is cheaper than cure. Preventing a pregnancy is cheaper than the delivery of a pregnancy. Treating AIDS is far more expensive than abstention and preventing AIDS. Finally, cost containment coaching has become essential with rising contributions. Advisors who help families avoid unnecessary out-of-pocket expenses deliver immediate, tangible value. That lady wants to save money. She wants to go down to another option or another medical scheme that is cheaper, that offers less value than the one that she's on. Why not just maximize what you are on? Then people will be able to stay on a medical scheme option. Advisors who position themselves as educators, advocates, and risk specialists, solution architects, rather than salespeople, are the ones who will lead the market in the coming years. Remember what I said in that book, Medical Schemes Explained. Your role is three things: guide, educate, and protect. That's the three roles of the financial advisor. When we talk about building a modern advisory practice, there's 6 steps that form the entire architecture. Together, these 6 steps create a practice that is positioned, trusted, efficient, and scalable. You sometimes want to leave your practice. You want to on-sell it. Sometimes you want to scale it. You want to do more. And you need to follow these 6 steps that will assist in you doing that. So let's unpack each one of these 6 steps quickly. Step 1 is positioning. Advisors who grow are those who build a clear specialist identity, because specialization creates trust, it creates confidence, and it creates differentiation. The first part of positioning is choosing a niche. It could be, I work with corporates, or I work with families, or I work with high-risk individuals, or SMMEs. And what some people don't understand when you create a niche, it doesn't mean that you only service that, but what it means is that you need to tailor your message. You need to tailor your service delivery for that specific niche. And I think that is immensely important. The second part is defining the problem you solve. Members who do not want medical scheme, members do not want a medical scheme. They don't want a medical scheme. They want fewer surprises, fewer co-payments, fewer financial shocks. Corporates want healthier, more productive employees. High-risk clients want certainty that the care will be paid for. In this specific lady's case, she's got a certain diabetic problem and she wants to go somewhere and she wants to make sure that that will be paid. Clearly define the problem positions as you solve the solution. The final part is a clear value statement, such as, and here's one for you, I help families manage their medical scheme efficiently. Why? So that they can avoid unnecessary costs and financial shocks. Without a clear positioning, growth becomes accidental. With it, growth becomes intentional and predictable. I see Laura says the slide still reflects step 1. Laura, sometimes it helps to go out and come back again. Okay, so step 2 is to create trust with a content engine. Now you can create that content engine easily. Short-term videos, short-form videos is the first element. A weekly 45-second video forces clarity. It forces you to have that clarity, what you're going to get across. And it respects the viewer's time. It shows that you have that respect. You do not need a studio or editing. Only message that answers real member questions. So over time, these positioning help you as advisor to explain the industry in a very simple manner. PMB Mythbusters are powerful. Members are overwhelmed by misinformation. Correcting misunderstandings with real examples establishes credibility. Again, yesterday's discussion. The lady's spouse is on a different medical scheme, and he's on a quite expensive option. He's got quite serious health conditions, and he pays about 4,000 rand a month in medication that is PMBs and that should be paid in full. Now, that's not clever. And by explaining that, she actually saw the value, and I will see them over the weekend. Scheme comparisons build trust by highlighting differences members would otherwise miss. The Medcare case studies that I provide to you in my newsletters provide proof by showing outcomes and expertise in dispute resolution and PMB interpretation. You can take that content and out of that develop certain educational videos to make it easy. Your digital presence matters. LinkedIn builds credibility, while WhatsApp, cross-card lists nurture existing clients. You can use those things. It's quite easy to do. And then the purpose of this content engine is positioning. It shows your needs, that you understand the world and builds trust that leads to long-term relationships. The third focus is on developing a client onboarding system. And that's where we actually go wrong. If you have the correct onboarding system, a structured first meeting is more than a conversation. It is a diagnostic session. It enables you to gather information required to make responsible evidence-based recommendations. And to give you an example, Stephen shared with you a specific slide of his onboarding system that is automated. But every single client of his get exactly the same onboarding system. Isn't that good? It's consistent, it's quick, it's professional, it's fast. I think that is what we want to do. And I think that's a great thing. And thanks for sharing that, Stephen. Once this information is gathered, you can produce a benefit optimization report. This clearly demonstrates where the client is overspending, underprotected, or exposed to unnecessary risk, and how adjustments can improve the value. When clients see this presented logically, trust increases significantly. PMB awareness checks are essential. Most members are unaware of their rights. Explaining what is covered at cost and under which conditions empower clients and reduces future disputes. So the contribution versus value matrix that you can also develop by way of AI helps you actually to understand the relationship and helps people to actually understand where they are. So finally, documentation templates ensure that you are consistent and professional and saving you an enormous amount of time. So strong onboarding system elevates you from a salesperson to an advisor, and from an advisor to a trusted partner. And what is that? And I'm going to say it again, a real solution architect. This fourth step is service excellence that builds retention. Step 4 focuses on this specifically. Retention is the lifeblood of a sustainable practice, even a sustainable medical scheme. If you retain more people, you will grow. If you don't have growth, go and look at how you retain clients or not retaining clients. Clients stay when they feel supported, protected, and understood. Turnaround time is critical. Delays are interpreted as incompetence, while fast, accurate responses build that confidence. And the broker who responds consistently become the brokers or the clients, build the client's trust. AI automation can help you do that. In terms of what Stephen showed you, when that happens, it's automated. You immediately get it. Isn't that great when you can actually see that happening? Annual benefit reviews are essential because clients need change. As families grow, chronic conditions develop, financial affordability shifts, and scheme benefits evolve. So proactive reviews help. We know when we actually go and look at a claims transaction history of our clients, we can actually look, what happened last year? You ran out of benefits, but you did so for the last 5 years. Maybe I need to communicate with that person differently. Or you have a certain amount in your savings account. Maybe I need to communicate with that client in a different way. But that shows that I look at it and I actually understand it. Claims escalation further cements your loyalty. When claims go wrong, clients want an advocate who can actually understand the system and act decisively. Transparent communication and year-round availability matter. Educating clients on why decisions matter empowers them and strengthens loyalty. Service excellence is not a luxury. It is the growth engine of a modern practice. So if I go to the fifth step, we're nearly done with the 6 steps. Step 5 focuses on efficiency through deploying AI. There are only so many hours in a day, and administrative work quietly destroys your productivity. And if you don't know it, the minister approved an increase for us, and it's a wonderful R3 a month. So we can do quite a lot with that. Years back, I sent the minister Wilson Toffee, and I said the increase is exactly the same as what the Wilson Toffee cost. I didn't put my name there. And I share my Wilson Toffee with you. Okay, so that's my sense of humor. This is where AI and standard operating procedures become essential. Scheduling is a simple example. Automated bookings remove back and forth communication. Have you ever tried with 3 people setting up a meeting? This person can't make it at 3 o'clock, the other one can only make it from 9 o'clock. And then you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it is various communications. I have a meeting that I need to attend that's very important, and all 3 people in that meeting need to do that. That was, and it was, we all agreed to it. That was today 5 messages to get that done. It's easier when we can do it this way. Chatbox and frequently asked systems provide immediate assistance to clients even after hours. They do not replace the advisor. They remove repetitive queries and free up capacity for higher value work that we actually have to do. Automated reminders ensure consistency across reviews, contribution changes, chronic registrations, and updates. Step 6, bring everything together. And that is through strategic partnerships. No advisory practice can grow in isolation. we need people to partner with us. The need of clients have become far broader than just choosing a medical scheme option. And the advisors who position themselves in the center of this ecosystem create far more value than ultimately far more loyalty to the brand that you want to build. Benefit options alone no longer create loyalty. Primary care enable advisors to serve clients that isn't part of the medical scheme or that want to use their medical scheme very efficiently. Primary care works well in that space. Earned wage access is another important lever. Financial stress is a major driver, and that's why people lapse and downgrade. Why don't we just sort out their problems? We're a solution architect. Wellness partnerships shifts the focus from reaction to prevention. Employers, particularly SMMEs, want a solution. These things are expensive, and some of the providers don't want to speak to a company with 10 or 15 employees. This provides a solution to them. AI coaching is an emerging opportunity that enable IFAs to position themselves as informed, forward-thinking professionals. Finally, efficiency awareness for members is powerful. How you use your medical scheme. Choice, efficiency beats choice. So how you use it. Strategic partnerships elevate the advisor from a broker to a solution architect and support sustainable practice growth. If we look at lens number 4, that's the 6 steps. If we look at the 4 lenses, the first lens is grow through improved client value. So how do you actually improve the client value? When clients understand their benefits, know their rights, and use their medical scheme correctly, they experience fewer shocks, fewer disputes, and lower unnecessary costs. PMB explanation are one of the fastest ways to increase perceived value. Most members do not fully understand what a PMB is, what it covers, and how it applies. They need your help. The same applies to explaining benefits and the rights of members. What can they do when things go wrong? Who's there to actually advocate for their matter? Teaching clients how to use their medical scheme efficiently is often misunderstood and underestimated. When you show them how to avoid co-payments, secure authorization, when there's a co-payment, what can you do? Wet van Transvaal. When the savings account runs out, what can you do? You have to cough out and pay. But when you help him not to do that, you become the solution architect. Finally, annual structured reviews ensures value continue as health needs change, finances and circumstances change. Better value builds trust. Trust drives retention. If you look at lens number 2, without structure, automation and standardization, growth becomes impossible. But there's something else. Burnout is inevitable. Automated administration is often the fastest improvement. Simple automation, such as scheduling, onboarding forms, renewal reminders, the stuff that Stephen spoke about, that frees up capacity to focus on advising clients, solving problems, and building relationships. AI-assisted workflows further helps you. And finally, efficiency is not about cutting corners. That's another ethical challenge in terms of AI. It's about creating a capacity to serve more clients, deliver higher quality advice, and grow sustainably without sacrificing your health or your standards. And that's important for independent financial advisors. Lens 3 focuses on strategic partnering. In today's environment, you cannot meet every client's need. By aligning with the right partners, you expand the value to deliver without increasing workload. The same with primary care partnerships, the same applies to gap cover and earned wage access. When partnerships solve real problems, growth becomes a natural outcome of good advice. And the fourth lens is the most powerful multiplier of growth, and that is retention. Retention is not passive. It results from deliberate, structured actions that keep clients informed, supported, and protected. Consistent communication is the foundation. Escalated claims and efficiency support are where many advisors win clients for life. The core message is simple. Retention multiplies growth. Stable clients become advocates, refer others, and add dependence and grow with you. Retention is not only defensive, it is a powerful offensive strategy to long-term practice success. So the broker of the future. The broker of the future is not defined by products, but by mastery, efficiency, and measurable value. The first shift is a deep understanding of PMBs and member rights. That's no longer optional. Second shift is the automation of routine tasks. Brokers spend hours on admin or have a huge administrative back office. And the third shift is using AI to enhance service, not replace the advisor. An AI coach can assist with reports, benefit analysis, query triage, and drafting communication, ensuring consistency and speed. The broker of the future delivers integrated solutions, gap, primary care, and wellness, because they solve real client problems as a solution architect. Above all, the future broker is an advisor, not a seller of products. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the CPD session. We have now completed the section, and in the interest of time, can we address your questions at the end of the session? We will answer it then. And over to you, Chris. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Andre, and again the wealth of information assisting broker practice built, well received. Thank you so much.